Usually, history is treated like this dusty artifact behind a pane of museum glass, you know?
Right, yeah, neatly categorized.
Exactly. You see a rusted sword or like a crumbling manuscript, you read a little placard listing off some dates, and the curator essentially points and says, there it is. That is what happened.
And it feels very static.
Right. It feels safe. We like our history to be completely separated from the messy, emotional, deeply flawed realities of our actual lives.
Yeah.
But then you step into the world of ancient epic poetry and legend, and suddenly that pane of glass just shatters. You aren't just looking at dates anymore. You are standing inside like a narrative earthquake.
That's a great way to put it.
So today we are bringing you, the listener, into a landscape that is massive, bleeding, and incredibly complicated. We're diving into excerpts from the Shahnameh.
Or the Persian Book of Kings.
Right. Written by Abolkasem Ferdowsi. And our mission on this deep dive is to guide you through this sprawling 1,000-year historical and mythological epic without, getting entirely lost in the sheer scale of it all.
Because it is massive.
Oh, it's huge. And it isn't just a dusty text. It's a masterclass in the limits of human loyalty, the inevitable corruption of power, star-crossed lovers, and, wait for it, giant magical birds.
You really can't overstate the scale here. I mean, if we measure this epic by the standards of Western literature, you are looking at over 100,000 lines of verse.
Which is just staggering to think about.
It is. To put that in perspective, that is roughly twice the length of the Iliad and the Odyssey combined.
Wait, combined?
Combined, yeah. So
Yes.
it's a monumental exercise in endurance, not just for the guy writing it, but for the civilization that actually produced it.
I think the best way to conceptualize what Ferdowsi pulled off here is to think about modern, multi-generational cinematic universes.
Oh, like Marvel or Star Wars.
Exactly. We have our superhero franchises, right? Core heroes, legacy characters, villains who keep popping up across different eras, endless prequels.
Right.
But imagine if that cinematic universe wasn't just, weekend entertainment. Imagine if a single author sat down and used that framework to literally codify the cultural identity, the language, and the historical memory of an entire region of the world.
That is exactly what the Shahnameh is.
But to understand how a story that massive actually functions, we can't just jump straight into the monster slaying.
No, we have to look at the political and cultural pressure cooker that forced this epic into existence in the first place.
Right. So we're going back to what, like the 10th century?
Yeah, roughly 940 CE.
Yeah.
Right around the time Ferdowsi was born, the geopolitical landscape of the region was undergoing this seismic shift.
Because of the Abbasid Empire, right?
Exactly. For nearly 3 centuries, following the Arab conquest in the 600 CE, the region had been folded into these massive Islamic caliphates, primarily ruled by the Abbasids based in Baghdad.
Okay, so a huge centralized power.
Right. And during that time, Arabic became the dominant language of religion, administration, and high culture. Persians, despite having this incredibly rich ancient heritage, were often treated as second-class citizens within this new empire.
Which naturally creates a lot of resentment.
Exactly. But by the 10th century, that centralized Abbasid grip was fraying.
I mean, the empire was just getting too big to manage, right? So local power centers start to break away.
Right. In Western Persia, you had the rise of dynasties like the Buyids and the Samanids.
And from what our sources indicate, these local rulers weren't just taking political control. They were launching a very deliberate, highly calculated cultural revival.
Yes. They started claiming direct descent from the ancient Sasanian kings.
The Persian rulers who were in charge before the Arab conquest.
Exactly. It was a very specific form of statecraft. The Samanids, in particular, realized that military power just wasn't enough to legitimize their rule.
Right. They needed a cultural mandate.
Yeah. So they actively championed a new Persian language at their courts. They essentially declared that, you didn't need to write in Arabic to be considered civilized or educated. They were funding a complete renaissance of indigenous identity.
Which brings up a really fascinating tension regarding the author himself. Our sources note that Ferdowsi was a faithful, practicing Muslim.
He was, yeah.
He belonged to a society that had been Islamic for centuries by that point. Yet, when you open the Shahnameh, it does not read like a text trying to align itself with the prevailing religious orthodoxy of the broader empire.
Not at all.
It actively prioritizes local, ancient Persian creation myths. I mean, it begins with Kayumars, the legendary first man and first king of Persian lore.
And that is a crucial distinction. And, we're observing this impartially as a historical and literary mechanism. Ferdowsi wasn't writing a theological treatise.
Right.
He was writing an ethnic preservation project. Islam is certainly present in the text, but the epic prizes Persian tradition first.
It's the story of a people drawing a line in the sand.
Yes, saying, our history did not begin when we were conquered. The epic covers the lives of 50 monarchs. That's 47 kings and 3 queens, stretching across 16 centuries of history and legend.
Reaching all the way past the Arab conquest itself.
Exactly.
But the mechanics of how he actually wrote this are they're staggering. We are talking about 50,000 couplets. And the sources specify that each line contains exactly 22 syllables.
It's incredible discipline.
Yeah. To maintain that precise rhythmic structure across an entire lifetime of writing, it's almost incomprehensible. So how much of this was he inventing and how much was he pulling from actual records?
Well, he was primarily working as a literary synthesizer. He certainly had access to some written prose chronicles that had been commissioned earlier by the Samanid court.
Okay.
And he had texts covering historical figures like Alexander the Great, who actually appears in the epic as Sikandar. But a massive portion of the Shahnameh was drawn from the oral traditions of the Daquans.
The Dequans, those are the landed gentry, right? Like the rural aristocracy who had held on to the old stories.
Exactly. The Dequans were the keepers of the flame. Ferdowsi was taking these disparate, inherited memories, these fireside legends, and systematically stitching them together.
Wow.
He was engineering the DNA of a civilization's memory into a unified 22-syllable metrical heartbeat.
Okay, and this raises a massive red flag for me. If we have a local dynasty, the Samanids, actively funding and championing this cultural revival to legitimize their own rule.
Right.
And Ferdowsi is the guy writing the ultimate Book of Kings for them. Isn't this text basically just the medieval equivalent of state-sponsored propaganda?
That's a very fair question.
Because if the guys signing your paychecks want to be seen as the heirs to the glorious ancient kings, you are obviously going to write an epic that paints those kings as flawless divine rulers, right?
That is the logical assumption to make about state-sponsored art. You expect a sanitized, glowing portrait of the ruling class.
Exactly.
But what makes the Shahnameh a masterpiece, and honestly what makes it endure, is how Ferdowsi actively subverts that expectation.
Right.
Yeah. The text is actually highly critical of kingship. The monarchs in this epic are frequently paranoid, they're deeply flawed, and they're prone to disastrous, arrogant decisions.
Wait, that is incredibly counterintuitive. How does he get away with painting the kings as the villains in a book, ostensibly celebrating them?
By creating a parallel structure of morality.
Okay.
In the Shahnameh, the true moral center does not lie with the royal Kainid dynasty who sits on the throne.
Okay.
The sympathies of the reader are almost entirely directed toward the governed, not the governors.
Oh, wow.
Specifically, the moral compass is held by a family of legendary champions who serve the kings. The Nariman family.
Ah, the muscle of the empire.
The muscle, but also the conscience. The story of this family, starting with Sam, continuing with his son Zal, and culminating with the ultimate hero, Rustem, is the beating heart of the epic.
That makes sense.
Through them, Ferdowsi explores the agonizing tension of good men forced to serve bad leadership.
Well, let's follow that thread directly into the origin story of this family, because it starts with Sam, right?
Yes.
The text describes him as the Peliva of the world. So he's a mythic hero and a fiercely loyal general to the Persian throne. And for years, Sam is desperate for an heir.
Right.
Finally, his wish is granted. He has a son. A baby described as incredibly beautiful, but with a severe physical anomaly. The boy is born with stark, completely white hair.
Yeah, the text notes his hair was like unto that of an aged man. And you have to remember, in the context of ancient mythology, physical differences are rarely viewed neutrally.
Right.
They're almost always interpreted as omens.
And Sam's reaction is absolute, unadulterated panic. He doesn't look at his newborn son and feel love. He feels terror. He honestly believes the child is demonic.
Yeah, it's pretty brutal.
But what really drives his decision-making is his ego. Our sources point out that Sam's primary motivation is public relations.
Right, he's terrified of the mockery of his enemies.
Exactly. He cannot stand the thought of his rivals laughing at the great champion Sam for producing a quote-unquote defective heir.
It is a profound exploration of human vanity. Sam justifies his cruelty by claiming the child will bring a curse upon the land of Iran. But the text is very clear. He is fearing the jeers of his enemies.
It's all about his image.
Yes.
Yes.
And to protect his own reputation, Sam commits the ultimate unnatural act. He takes his infant son and abandons him at the foot of Mount Alborz.
Which is not just a gentle hill.
No, it's a place described as so high its head touches the stars, a desolate peak where no mortal foot had ever tread.
He literally leaves a newborn on a glacier to die, just to avoid embarrassment at court. The imagery the source provides for this moment is incredibly visceral.
It really is.
It says the baby is left bare on the earth, sucking its fingers for very hunger. But the boy doesn't die, because Mount Alborz is the home of the Simurgh.
Ah, the Simurgh. This is a fascinating mythological creature. It's a massive, ancient bird, often compared to a phoenix, though deeply rooted in specific Zoroastrian and Persian cosmology.
The nest she builds is essentially a fortress of mystical wood. The text says it is built of ebony, sandalwood, and aloes. It basically resembles a king's house.
Yes.
And it is built so high that, quote, the evil sway of Saturn could not reach it.
That detail about Saturn is vital, actually.
Really? Why is that?
Because in classical and medieval astrology, Saturn was the greater malefic. It's the planet associated with melancholy, restriction, and cruel fate.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So by placing the nest above the reach of Saturn, Ferdowsi is telling us that this child is being removed from the corrupting, tragic influence of the human world.
That is brilliant.
Right. The nest is a sanctuary from the political and societal poisons that drove Sam to abandon him in the first place.
So the Simurgh sees the crying infant. Initially, her instinct is predatory, right? She plans to feed the boy to her young.
Right.
But then as she descends, this divine compassion stirs within her. She ignores her predatory nature, chooses tender meat for the boy, and actually raises him alongside her own chicks.
And this is Ferdowsi's devastating critique of the so-called civilized world.
How so?
Well, think about it. Sam, the renowned human hero, the pinnacle of Persian martial society, acts with the cold-blooded cruelty of a monster.
Right.
Meanwhile, the Simurgh, a savage beast of the wild, exhibits maternal grace, empathy, and humanity.
It's basically the Superman mythos, but with a really fascinating twist.
Oh, I like that comparison.
Yeah, think about it. Superman lands in Smallville, and his moral compass is forged by the absolute goodness of his human adoptive parents, the Kents. He becomes the best of humanity because he was raised by the best of humanity.
Right.
Zal, on the other hand, is raised by a giant magical bird on an isolated peak. His moral compass is uncorrupted precisely because he is completely insulated from human society.
Yes, he is raised outside the toxic environment of court politics and vanity. And that isolation is the crucible for his character. Zal grows into a massive, incredibly strong youth, basically running wild on the mountainside. And eventually, legends of this strange, powerful bird nursling make their way down the mountain and back to the court of Iran.
And they reach the ears of his dad, Sam.
They do. And this is where Sam experiences what looks like regret.
Looks like being the operative phrase here.
Right. He has a terrifying nightmare where a man on an Arab steed taunts him, basically saying, "You threw your son away because his hair was white, yet now your own hair has turned the color of a silver poplar."
So the ghost is calling out his hypocrisy.
Exactly. Sam wakes up sweating. He calls in his mubids, the wise men and astrologers of the court, and they absolutely rip into him.
I love that part. They do not hold back.
Not at all. They call him more cruel than the tiger or the crocodile. They point out that even the most vicious beasts of the earth nurture their young. They demand he go to the mountain and beg for forgiveness.
But I really want to pause on Sam's motivation here because, I don't buy the redemption arc.
Yeah.
No. Sam doesn't go back because he suddenly developed a deep paternal bond. He goes back because he had a bad dream. His religious advisors told him he was damned. And most importantly, he found out his abandoned kid actually survived and grew up to be a superhuman warrior.
That's a very pragmatic read on it.
He gathers his army, marches to the mountain, and looks up. When he sees this absolute unit of a young man, suddenly he wants to claim him. This isn't redemption, it's damage control.
Your skepticism is entirely justified, honestly. And it aligns with how the text views the ruling class. Sam is operating from a place of fear and self-interest.
Yep.
Even when he officially reclaims the boy, he names him Zal, which literally means the aged, proving he is still fixated on the boy's white hair.
Wow, so he still can't see past the physical.
Exactly. But he does make a binding oath to God to grant Zal whatever his heart desires from that day forward as a form of penance.
Which is going to become very important later. But before Zal leaves the mountain, the Simurgh gives him a parting gift. She knows he belongs with humanity, but she loves him.
It's a very touching moment.
It is. She plucks a magical feather from her breast and tells him, if he is ever in dire need, to burn the feather, and she will appear like a dark cloud to save him.
Yeah.
It's this incredibly emotional farewell. Zal is brought down the mountain to a massive military parade, with war elephants raising clouds of dust to the sky, trumpets blaring. He is integrated into the very society that rejected him.
But he is never truly of that society.
Right, because of his upbringing.
Exactly. Zal views the world through a completely different lens. He is devoid of the ingrained, multi-generational prejudices of the Iranian court.
Which is great for his character, but maybe not so great for his political survival.
No, because that lack of prejudice is exactly what blinds him to the political landmine he is about to step on.
Okay, set the scene for us.
Well, he takes over the administration of his father's lands, and he decides to visit the neighboring kingdom of Kabul.
Which leads us directly into the geopolitical romance of Zal and Rudabeh. So, Zal goes to Kabul, which is ruled by King Murad. Now, on paper, Murad pays tribute to the Iranian throne. He is technically a vassal, but there is a massive radioactive secret surrounding Murad's bloodline.
Yes, he is a direct descendant of Zahak.
Zahak, the Serpent King.
To understand why this matters, you have to understand that Zahak is the ultimate embodiment of ancient evil in the Persian mythos.
Like Sauron levels of evil.
Exactly. He is a demonic tyrant who ruled Iran for 1,000 years of darkness. He is famously depicted with two monstrous serpents growing out of his shoulders that literally had to be fed human brains.
Oh, crazy.
Yeah. And he was eventually overthrown by the ancestors of the current Iranian kings.
So, associating with the family of Zahak isn't just like a political faux pas, it is bordering on high treason.
Absolutely.
It's fraternizing with the literal descendants of the devil. But Zal, completely unburdened by these historical grudges, doesn't care. While in Kabul, his nobles start whispering about Murad's daughter, Rudabeh, and they describe her with this incredibly lush, poetic imagery. They say she is a slender cypress, her face is brighter than the sun, her mouth is like a pomegranate flower.
It is the classic medieval trope of falling in love through description. Zal becomes completely infatuated with the idea of her.
And simultaneously, Rudabeh hears tales of Zal.
She does. She hears about his immense strength, his wild upbringing, and yes, even his striking white hair. And she becomes equally obsessed.
So she tells her servants she wants to meet him, and her servants are just horrified.
Naturally.
They remind her that he is a bird nursling who was thrown away by his own father, but Rudabeh exhibits an incredible amount of agency here. She ignores the warnings and orchestrates a secret meeting.
This sets up what is arguably the most famous romantic sequence in the entire epic, the balcony scene.
Right, which is just an architectural and poetic masterpiece. Rudabeh is standing on the roof of her golden chambers. Zal approaches from the ground below.
And she literally unties her incredibly long, thick black hair and lets it fall all the way down the battlements to the ground.
It's like Rapunzel, but way more intense.
Very much so. She calls down to him, telling him to use her hair as a rope. The poetry in the source is striking here. She says, "Seize my black locks, for it is fitting that I should be a snare unto you."
Wow, a snare.
Yeah, the imagery of the snare is fascinating because it implies she has actively captured him. It totally flips the dynamic of the passive maiden waiting to be wooed.
She is completely in control.
She is. But Zal responds with deep chivalry. He refuses to cause her pain by climbing her hair. Instead, he produces his own cord, ties a running knot, lassos the battlement, and pulls himself up.
That's a great detail. And they spend the night together on the roof, talking, completely enchanted with one another. By the time the sun comes up, they have sworn a binding oath to marry.
Yes.
But when the sun does come up, the romantic haze burns off and the geopolitical reality sets in. This marriage would be a total catastrophe.
It really would. It forces Zal to test the limits of his father's penance.
Right. He dictates a letter to Sam, essentially saying, "Hey, Dad, you swore an oath before God to grant my desires because of how terribly you treated me. Well, my desire is to marry the descendant of the Serpent King. Please ask the Shah of Iran to approve this."
Which is just an incredible power play.
The nerve that takes. Remember when you left me to die on a glacier? Time to cash in that guilt trip?
Yeah, it's brilliant. And Sam's reaction is entirely predictable. He is trapped.
Right.
If he breaks his oath to his son, he offends God. If he supports the marriage, he commits treason against the Shah. He cries out in despair, complaining that a boy raised by a wild bird is now seeking union with an accursed race.
So what does a powerful military general do when he is faced with an impossible moral dilemma?
He outsources it.
He calls in the Mubids, the court astrologers.
This is a recurring mechanism in the Shahnameh. When diplomacy fails, when politics stall, they turn to the stars. The Mubids map the heavens to divine the outcome of this forbidden union.
They're basically medieval HR and conflict resolution all rolled into one.
That's exactly what they are.
And the stars deliver the ultimate political get-out-of-jail-free card. The astrologers come back to Sam and say, "We have read the heavens. If Zal and Rudabeh marry, they will produce a son. This son will be a hero of unmatched power and glory, a warrior who will conquer Iran's enemies and elevate the kingdom to the skies."
They promise him a geopolitical superweapon.
And that changes everything, doesn't it?
Everything. Morality, historical grudges, the bloodline of the Serpent King, all of it is instantly swept under the rug because the state requires a champion.
Of course.
Sam is convinced. He goes to the Shah, Minochir, who consults his own astrologers, receives the identical prophecy, and reluctantly agrees to allow the marriage.
But while the men are consulting star charts and wringing their hands, the real political maneuvering is being done by the women.
Absolutely. The source material highlights this beautifully.
Yeah, when King Mirab of Kabul finds out about the secret romance, he is furious. He's terrified that the Shah of Iran will use this as an excuse to wipe out his city. He literally threatens to kill his own daughter.
Right. And this is where Sindak, Rudabeh's mother, steps in. She is arguably one of the most brilliant political minds in the epic.
Really? Tell us about her.
Well, while her husband is having a violent meltdown, Sindak just takes charge. She orchestrates a secret diplomatic mission, intercepts Sam's army, and negotiates a peace treaty using her intellect, immense wealth, and sheer force of will.
That's incredible.
It is. The women in the Shahnameh are consistently the keepers of tradition and the architects of survival. They actively drive the narrative, while the men are paralyzed by pride and honor codes.
They manipulate the system perfectly. The men need the stars to justify the scandal, and the women ensure the alliance holds long enough for the prophecy to come true.
Exactly.
Which brings us to the birth of the promised superweapon, the arrival of Rustem.
And fittingly, his entrance into the world requires a literal act of magic.
Rudabeh's labor is agonizing. The text says she is afflicted, her body can find no rest, and it seems like she's going to die from the sheer size of the child. Zal is standing by, helpless and terrified. Then he remembers the parting gift from his childhood, the Simurgh's feather.
He casts it into the fire. The sky darkens, the rushing of massive wings fills the air, and his adoptive mother, the mystical bird, appears.
Just like she promised.
Yes. She instructs him not to despair, but to gather a skilled physician. She details a procedure to surgically deliver the child while keeping the mother sedated with wine.
Which the source implies is a poetic rendering of a cesarean section.
Right. It's fascinating that Ferdowsi includes this medical detail. It elevates Rustem's birth. You know, he isn't born normally. He is extracted through an act of divine intervention and human surgery.
And when Rudabeh wakes up and sees this massive baby, she smiles and says, "Truly he shall be called Rustem," which in the context of the poem she links to being delivered from her pain.
The symbolism is potent here. Rustem is forged from the union of two opposing bloodlines, brought into the world by the intervention of nature, magic, and science.
And he immediately proves the astrologers right. I mean, he is a prodigy of violence.
He really is.
The source gives us this incredible, chaotic anecdote from his childhood. Rustem is a boy, maybe 10 years old, asleep in his room. Outside, a massive white elephant belonging to the king breaks its chains.
It goes completely mad.
Right. Rampaging through the courtyards, crushing everything. The royal guards are terrified and bolt the doors. Rustem wakes up, hears the screaming, and demands to be let out. When the guards refuse, he doesn't argue. He just shatters the heavy doors with his bare fists.
This is a 10-year-old.
Yeah. He walks up to this rampaging, multi-ton elephant, takes his mace, and strikes it a single time on the head. The elephant drops dead. And then Rustem simply yawns and goes back to bed.
It is an absurd, mythic flex of power. It establishes early on that Rustem is operating on a completely different physical plane than the rest of humanity. He embodies another meaning of his name, which is strong as a river.
As Rustem grows into a man, the kingdom of Iran falls into a crisis. The throne is empty, and their ancient eternal enemy, the kingdom of Tehran, led by the ruthless king Afrasiab, is preparing to invade. Zal tells his son that Iran needs a leader from the ancient royal bloodline, the race of Feridun.
And this is where we really must unpack the philosophical core of the Shahnameh, the concept of the far, or the divine mandate of heaven.
The far. Okay, break that down for us.
In this Persian cosmology, legitimacy to rule is not based on merit, strength, or even intelligence. It is a mystical grace bestowed by God strictly upon the royal bloodline.
Okay, so you either have it or you don't.
Exactly. So Rustem rides out alone on his legendary warhorse, Rakush. He journeys deep into the Alborz Mountains and finds a young man named Kai Kobad sitting peacefully in a garden.
And Rustem approaches him and essentially says, "You have royal blood, get on the horse, we have an empire to save."
Yeah, that's pretty much it. Rustem single-handedly escorts this new Shah back to the capital, takes command of the Iranian army, absolutely decimates the Turanian forces of Afrasiab, and earns the title Tehemten, meaning the strong-limbed.
He single-handedly restores the political order, but this dynamic raises what I think is the most pressing question for anyone reading the text. Well, the champions of the Nariman family, Sam, Zal, and especially Rustem, are virtually always shown to be ethically, intellectually, and physically superior to the kings they serve.
Right.
If Rustem is strong enough to one-shot a mad elephant as a kid, and if he is the guy who literally has to ride into the mountains to fetch Kai Kobad to put him on the throne, why doesn't Rustem just sit on the throne himself?
It's a great question.
Why spend your entire life bleeding for a company with terrible management?
Because of the terror of anarchy.
Yeah.
We have to look at this through the lens of 10th century political philosophy. Ferdowsi had witnessed the splintering of empires.
Oh, right.
The logic of the Shahnameh dictates that if a strong man like Rustem usurps the throne simply because he is stronger, it shatters the sacred concept of the far.
It sets a precedent.
Exactly. It opens the door for any warlord to claim the throne. Even if the individual king is foolish, cowardly, or cruel, the institution of the monarchy must be preserved at all costs to prevent the complete collapse of civilization.
Wow. So Rustem is the ultimate adherent to the social contract. He believes in the order of the universe, so he accepts his role as the eternal servant. He is the perpetual bodyguard to a rotating cast of flawed monarchs.
But that absolute dedication to duty comes at a devastating personal cost. His life is an endless series of military campaigns, wandering the borders of the empire, far from his home in Sistan.
And it is this very lifestyle, the loneliness of the eternal warrior, that sets up his greatest tragedy.
It does.
Which takes us into the emotional devastation of the story of Rustem and Sohrab. If the Shahnameh is a cinematic universe, this is its most heartbreaking chapter.
Without a doubt, it is a masterclass in the destructive nature of secrets and martial pride.
So Rustem is out hunting near the borders of Turan, the enemy territory. He exhausts himself, falls asleep, and a group of Turanian knights sneak up and capture his horse, Rakush.
Right.
Now, Rakush isn't just a horse. He is Rustem's greatest companion, a beast as mythic as the hero himself. When Rustem wakes up and finds the horse gone, he is enraged. He tracks the horse's prints to the nearby city of Samangan.
And the king of Samangan is terrified. He knows that an angry Rustem could level his city.
Yeah, you don't want Rustem mad at you.
No, you don't. So he immediately plays the diplomat. He promises to deploy his entire guard to find the horse, and in the meantime, he invites Rustem to feast and sleep in his palace.
That night, Rustem is resting in his chambers. The door quietly opens. A slave enters carrying an amber-perfumed lamp, and behind the slave is a woman shrouded in a veil smelling of musk.
It is Tamina, the daughter of the king of Samangan, and her approach is incredibly calculated.
She possesses a profound agency, much like Rudabeh before her, right?
She doesn't come to Rustem with romantic poetry. She comes with a transaction based on eugenics and mythic reputation.
She gets right to the point.
She does. She tells him she has heard the terrifying legends of his strength, how he fears no demon, how the earth groans beneath his boots. She explicitly states she wants to bear his child, a son who will inherit his godlike power.
And in exchange, she guarantees the safe return of his horse.
Exactly.
Rustem looks at her, sees that she is beautiful and intelligent, and essentially says, deal. He asks her father for her hand, and they are married that very night.
Right.
But before Rustem leaves the next morning, because of course the horse is miraculously found, he gives Tamina a token. It is a precious onyx jewel.
The very significant item.
He tells her, if our child is a daughter, bind this in her hair. But if it is a son, bind it upon his arm, and it will give him the strength of his father.
And with that, Rustem rides away. He crosses the border back into Iran, back to the endless wars of his kings. And he never returns to Samangan.
He just vanishes. Tamina gives birth to a son, and she names him Sohrab. Unsurprisingly, Sohrab inherits the terrifying genetics of his father.
At 1 month old, he looks like a 12-year-old. By the time he is 10, no grown man in the city can beat him in wrestling. He's a walking weapon.
And eventually, he corners his mother and demands to know his lineage. He is aggressive about it, threatening to strike her from the rolls of the living if she lies.
Tamina yields. She reveals that he is the son of Rustem, the greatest champion of Iran. She shows him the onyx jewel, the letters, and the gold Rustem had sent over the years.
But she issues a desperate warning, right?
Yes. She says he must keep this a secret. If Afrasiab, the evil king of Tehran, finds out that Rustem is a son, he will assassinate the boy. Conversely, she fears that if Rustem learns how magnificent Sohrab has become, he will return and take the boy away from her.
Tamina's trying to thread an impossible needle here. But Sohrab is young, overflowing with testosterone, and completely arrogant. He refuses to hide.
Right.
He devises this wildly hubristic plan. He says he will raise a Turanian army, march into Iran, depose the Iranian Shah, put his father Rustem on the throne, and then conquer Tehran and rule it himself.
It is the ultimate fantasy of a son trying to violently insert himself into his absent father's life. But this plan relies on a fatal underestimation of the region's politics.
Because King Afrasiab of Tehran finds out about Sohrab's parentage.
He does, and Afrasiab is a Machiavellian genius.
Afrasiab sees an opportunity to eliminate his greatest nightmare. He sends his own veteran generals, Human and Barman, to join Sohrab's army with 12,000 troops. But they have strict, secret orders.
Right. Afrasiab tells them, you must ensure that Sohrab and Rustem meet on the battlefield, but you must never let them realize they are father and son.
That is so twisted.
It is. Afrasiab calculates that if they fight, one of two things will happen. Either the young, incredibly strong Sohrab kills Rustem, leaving Iran defenseless,
Okay.
or Rustem kills Sohrab, and when he inevitably discovers he just murdered his own child, the grief will destroy Rustem's mind. For Afrasiab, it's a flawless win-win scenario.
This is the tragic engine of the narrative. It is entirely driven by masculine ego, deception, and a toxic honor culture.
Absolutely.
As Sohrab's army marches into Iran, they lay siege to the White Castle. And here, Ferdowsi gives us a brilliant counterpoint to the male obsession with brute force through the character of Gurdefrid.
Yes, Gurdefrid is fantastic.
She is a female Iranian warrior. When the castle's commander is captured by Sohrab, she straps on her armor, hides her hair under her helmet, and rides out to duel this massive invader.
She fights bravely, but Sohrab is physically overpowering. He strikes her helmet, it falls off, and her long hair spills out. Sohrab is stunned to realize he's been fighting a woman.
But where physical strength fails, intellect prevails. Gurdefrid realizes she is outmatched, so she immediately manipulates Sohrab's ego.
That's so smart.
She tells him, if you take me prisoner, your army will laugh at you for expending so much effort to defeat a mere girl. Let me retreat into the castle, and I will convince the garrison to surrender the fortress to you.
Sohrab, blinded by pride and a bit of chivalry, falls for it. He lets her go. The moment she is safely behind the walls, she locks the gates and mocks him from the battlements.
Once again, a woman in the Shahnameh outsmarts the violently posturing men. She uses her intellect to secure her survival.
Right, but her warning messages reach the Shah of Iran, who immediately summons Rustem from Sastan to deal with this terrifying new Turanian warlord.
Which sets the stage for the ultimate, devastating confrontation. Rustem and Sohrab finally meet on the battlefield.
And the tragic irony is agonizing. Neither man knows what the other looks like.
But as they face each other, Sohrab's intuition flares. He looks at this massive, scarred, towering warrior, and he feels a magnetic pull. He lowers his weapon and asks directly, "Tell me your name. It seems unto me that you are none other than Rustem."
It is the moment where the entire tragedy could be averted.
Exactly. But Rustem makes a fateful, disastrous choice. He looks at this young, arrogant commander leading an enemy army, and he lies. He says, "I am not Rustem. I am a slave and own neither a crown nor a throne." Why does he do that? Why deny his own name, the thing he's most proud of?
We have to analyze the psychology of medieval warfare here. Rustem is engaging in psychological warfare.
Okay.
He wants to demoralize Sohrab. By claiming to be a mere slave, he is sending a message. If the lowliest servants of Iran are this massive and terrifying, imagine what our actual champion, Rustem, will do to you.
So it's about intimidating the kid.
Exactly. It is a tactical deception born of martial pride. But that lie seals their doom.
It really is the ultimate inversion of the Darth Vader reveal. In Star Wars, the father uses the revelation of identity to try and turn the son to end the conflict.
Right.
In the Shahnameh, the son has spent his entire life desperately seeking that connection, actively asking for the truth to prevent bloodshed. But the father, obsessed with maintaining his intimidating aura, lies. And so they fight.
And the fight is apocalyptic. The poetry describes them battling for days. They fight with spears until the shafts shatter.
Then they switch to swords.
Yeah, hacking at each other until the blades bend like saws. They use heavy maces until the handles splinter. They're reduced to grappling in the dirt, covered in blood, sweat, and torn armor. At one point, Sohrab actually gains the upper hand. He pins Rustem to the ground and draws his dagger.
Rustem only survives by tricking the kid. He tells Sohrab that in Persian custom, a warrior cannot be beheaded on the first throw. He must be thrown twice.
And Sohrab, being naive and honorable, lets him up.
And that night, Rustem realizes he's genuinely outmatched by this kid. So he does something drastic. He prays, he asks God to restore the full mythic strength of his youth, a strength he had previously asked God to diminish because it was too destructive.
The theological implication here is profound. God answers the prayer. God grants Rustem so much raw power that the next day as he walks onto the battlefield, the actual rock beneath his boots begins to crumble and give way.
He is granted the power to win, but it is a cursed victory.
Yes. When they engage the next day, Rustem is unstoppable. He seizes Sohrab by the girdle, lifts him entirely off the ground, hurls him into the dirt with the force of a meteor, and breaks the young man's back.
And as Sohrab lies there, paralyzed and dying in agony, he doesn't curse his killer. He gives a great sigh and says, "My father will avenge my death, for my father is Rustem."
The psychological whiplash Rustem experiences in that exact second is unimaginable. He drops his sword. The text says the earth goes dark before his eyes and he collapses in a faint.
When he regains consciousness, he desperately demands proof, praying it is a lie. Sohrab tells him to unlace his armor. Rustem pulls back the mail, and there, bound to the boy's arm, is the onyx jewel.
The revelation shatters him. Rustem's reaction is one of absolute self-destruction. He tears his own clothes, he pours ashes over his head, he literally builds a fire and burns his tent, his magnificent leopard skin armor, the trappings of his glory.
He begs his own soldiers to kill him.
Yes. The tactical pride that caused him to lie has resulted in the murder of his own legacy.
And I really want to focus on Rustem's culpability here. Throughout the epic, he is painted as the savior of Iran. But this is a colossal moral failure.
It absolutely is.
He abandoned his wife after one night. He never checked on his child. And when that child stood in front of him, begging for a peaceful resolution, Rustem's ego demanded violence. He isn't just a victim of fate. He's the architect of his own tragedy.
Ferdowsi does not let Rustem off the hook for that. This event fundamentally breaks the hero. He continues to serve the throne for centuries. Remember, the timeline is mythic, but he carries an open psychological wound.
He is vulnerable in a way he never was before.
Exactly. And it is that lingering grief, combined with the shifting, toxic dynamics within his own extended family, that eventually paves the way for his downfall.
Which brings us to the final act of our deep dive, the betrayal and the end of an era, the death of Rustem.
The Shahnameh operates on a cyclical framework of fate. The saga of this family began with Sam's cruel mistreatment of his son Zal, and it ends with another act of profound familial dysfunction.
So Zal, who is still alive and ruling Sistan, has a child with a slave woman, a son named Shugdad. Just like when Zal was born, the astrologers are called in to read the stars.
Right.
And the stars deliver a terrifying verdict. Shugdad will be the ruin of the Nariman family. He will destroy the race of Sam.
But Zal, perhaps overcompensating for the trauma of his own abandonment on the mountain, refuses to cast the boy out. He raises Shugdad tenderly. When Shugdad comes of age, Zal sends him to the kingdom of Kabul, where the young man marries the daughter of the king of Kabul.
Now, Kabul is technically a vassal state that owes heavy annual taxes and tribute to Rustem. The king of Kabul bitterly resents this.
Naturally.
He complains about the tribute to his new son-in-law, Shugdad. And Shugdad, who harbors a deep, simmering jealousy of his legendary half-brother Rustem, agrees to help murder him. They hatch an incredibly elaborate, cowardly plot.
The mechanics of the trap rely entirely on Rustem's predictable sense of honor and familial duty. The king of Kabul stages a public feast where he deliberately insults Shugdad.
Shugdad feigns outrage and flees to Sistan, throwing himself at Rustem's feet, crying that his honor has been besmirched.
And Rustem, predictable as ever, flies into a rage at the insult to his family. He gathers a small force and marches toward Kabul to demand an apology.
But before Rustem arrives, the king of Kabul sends his men out to the royal hunting grounds. They dig deep pits along the pathways, and they line the bottoms of these pits with upward-facing swords, spears, and lances.
It's a brutal trap.
It is. Then they carefully covered the pits with earth and leaves so the ground looks perfectly undisturbed. When Rustem arrives, the king immediately grovels, begs for forgiveness, blames the wine for the insult, and invites Rustem on a reconciliation hunt.
Rustem accepts. He mounts his great horse, Rakush, and they ride into the hunting grounds. But Rakush is not a normal animal.
No, the horse possesses an almost supernatural instinct. As they approach the trap, Rakush smells the freshly turned soil. He senses the imminent danger. The horse rears up, stops dead, and refuses to take another step forward.
And this is where Rustem makes his final fatal mistake. He is impatient. He is annoyed that his brave, legendary warhorse is suddenly acting like a frightened foal.
So Rustem takes out a whim and strikes Rakush. The source text explicitly highlights the tragedy of this moment, noting, quote, "Before this day, he had never raised his hand against his steed."
We must analyze what this represents. Rakush has been Rustem's truest companion, his savior in countless battles, the only creature that truly shared the burden of his mythic isolation.
Right.
By whipping Rakush, Rustem ignores his own instincts. He betrays his closest ally out of sheer arrogance. It is the exact same flaw that caused him to lie to Sohrab.
Rakush's reaction is agonizing. The text implies the horse's soul is deeply grieved. Out of sheer, tragic loyalty to his master, Rakush obeys the whip. He leaps forward.
And the ground immediately gives way beneath them.
They plunge into the pit, the hidden spears and swords skewer the horse, and they drive deep into Rustem's flesh.
The greatest warrior of the age, the man who slaughtered armies and demons, is undone by a hidden hole in the dirt. But Rustem is not quite dead.
Right. Through sheer impossible willpower, he manages to drag his bleeding, impaled body to the edge of the pit and pull himself up onto the solid ground.
He looks up and sees Shugdad's face peering out from the trees. And he realizes the truth. His own brother set the trap.
So, Rustem, bleeding out, puts on a terrifyingly calm facade. He looks at Shugdad and says, "Brother, give me my bow and place before me 2 arrows. If a lion comes upon me while I am dying, let me at least defend myself so I'm not eaten like carrion."
Shugdad, completely unnerved by the fact that Rustem is still breathing, strings the bow and hands it to him. But the moment the weapon is in Rustem's hand, panic sets in. Shugdad realizes his mistake and runs.
He finds an ancient, massive plane tree with a hollowed-out trunk, and he scrambles inside it to hide, thinking the thick wood will protect him.
And this is without a doubt the most cinematic, brutal exit for a hero imaginable.
It really is. Rustem, lying on the ground, taking his final breaths, raises the bow, he notches the arrow, he draws it back with whatever mythic strength he has left, and he fires.
He shoots the arrow with so much force that it drives completely through the solid outer trunk of the tree, piercing the hollow center and pinning Shugdad to the wood inside.
He literally nails his betrayer to the tree, killing him instantly. Rustem sees the blood, smiles, thanks God that he lived long enough to exact his vengeance, and then he dies.
It is a breathtaking conclusion to the life of a titan. But it forces us to grapple with the overarching theme of inevitability in Ferdowsi's work. The text poses the question, how shall a man escape from that which is written?
Right.
The answer in the world of the Shahnameh is that he cannot.
But I keep coming back to Zal. Zal knew the prophecy. The astrologers explicitly told him that Shugdad would destroy the family. If he had just banished the child or left him on a mountain like Sam did to him, none of this would have happened. Why didn't he act?
Because that is the paradox of fate.
Yeah.
If Zal had banished Shugdad, his cruelty would have simply created a different chain of events leading to the exact same outcome.
Wow.
The tragedy of the Shahnameh is that human agency is essentially an illusion playing out within the boundaries of a pre-written destiny. The epic ends this chapter in suffocating grief. News reaches Sistan. Zal is crushed by the loss of his son.
And Rutabe, the passionate woman who threw her hair from the balcony to start this lineage, is driven mad with sorrow.
The golden age of the Persian champions is definitively over.
And that brings us to the end of the journey we have mapped out for you today. We have covered an immense expanse of narrative territory.
You really have.
We started with Ferdowsi in the 10th century, laboring over 50,000 couplets to synthesize the soul of a marginalized people. We climbed the glaciers of Mount Alborz to watch a mythical bird raise an abandoned white-haired child.
We saw how the machinations of court astrologers and brilliant queens forged an empire's greatest weapon.
We witnessed the devastating consequences of pride on the battlefield between a father and an unrecognized son, and we watched a legendary hero fire his final arrow through the trunk of a tree to avenge his own betrayal.
As we step back from the text, I want to leave you with a thought regarding the nature of preservation itself. In our modern era, we are obsessed with how to preserve our own history. We worry constantly about digital decay, server crashes, the obsolescence of file formats, and the terrifyingly fragile nature of our collective data. Right. We build massive, sterile archives in an attempt to hold on to the past. But Ferdowsi managed to preserve 16 centuries of a civilization's history, not by archiving dry dates or treaties, but by synthesizing it into an emotional reality. He wove the deepest fears, the fatal flaws, the toxic prejudices, and the breathtaking triumphs of a people into a rhythm of 22 syllables.
Yeah.
He built a structure out of poetry that proved more resilient than any physical fortress. Because 1,000 years later, we are still sitting here analyzing the psychological warfare of his duels, feeling the agonizing sting of Rustem's pride, and mourning the death of a mythical horse.
It really forces you to look around at our own culture. What are the stories of our era that possess that kind of structural integrity? What narratives are we building today that will survive a millennium, and who will be the ones with the endurance to write them down? Because as it turns out, history isn't an artifact you keep safely behind glass. When the story is told right, the glass shatters, and the ghosts of the past step out to breathe right alongside you. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.